So we're going to start with basic information that you already know. You already know that we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? 22 of those pairs are called autosomes, which means that they're the same for males and females. We have the same size, shape chromosome. And then we have a pair of sex chromosomes that determines your gender. All right? So, autosomes are the ones that contain all the other genes that we possibly could use. Okay, then in the chromosomes, there are chunks of the chromosome that are called genes, and those genes code for certain proteins. A lot of people actually got that wrong on their post-unit question as I've been grading. If you remember back before Christmas, we talked about how you take DNA and then it turns to RNA and then that makes protein. So the whole point of that is that you need these genes to make proteins. So when we're talking about the gene for skin color, that means you are either producing more or less of the pigment melanin, which is a protein. So that gene is determining how much of that protein you're making, basically. Okay, so it all comes down to genes. Now, when I went to high school, genes were basically talked about as if, like, they didn't really know anything about it. They knew that there were these little chunks called genes, but we had no idea what they did or why they were important or anything. So since 2005 is when the Human Genome Project wrapped up. And the Human Genome Project was basically this big effort to try to figure out what's in our genes. So in our DNA code, there are 6 billion letters. A's, T's, C's, G's. There's 6 billion of them. So people soon realized that for one scientific team to figure out all of those 6 billion letters, it was going to take like 30 years. And they wanted to get rolling on it fast. So what they did is they divvied up the chromosomes to teams all over the world. And those teams then sequenced like one chromosome and then added it to a database. And then all these teams uploaded their data. And so we finally ended up with a picture of all 23 chromosomes and what they look like and all the letters on those chromosomes. This was the first scientific project in which people actually cooperated with each other. Usually scientists like to keep things private because they want to win a prize or get published or, you know, things like that. So usually it's tight-lipped kind of things, but this is the first time it was actually cooperative. This is when we found out we have 22,000 genes, which they thought out of 6 billion letters we would have a lot more than that, but we actually have less genes than a banana, if that makes you feel good about yourself. But our genes have a lot of bang for their buck, right? They're producing a lot of different proteins based on that. We don't have any really wasted gene at all. Okay? So since the Human Genome Project, we have figured out a lot of things. First of all, there's 2 kinds of disorders that we can group them into. One kind of disorder is a mutation, and that would be like an A turning to a T in the code, just a little change. And that is different, or we talked about this before Christmas, the point mutation, the frame shift mutation, right? You remember that at all? How it kind of just messed up the protein a little bit. So that's one kind of mutation. There are 2 basic categories of mutations. One is called a germline, which means there's something in egg or sperm that it's a mutation that gets passed along. Okay, so that is something, the ones that we've been studying, like hemophilia, those are germline. That gets passed along in a pedigree over and over again, right? Then there is somatic mutations, where like if I went to a tanning bed and I were lying there and one of my skin cells got zapped and that turned into cancer. That skin cancer would not get passed to my baby, right? That's just an isolated incident. That's something that happened to me, but it's not being passed along. So there's some that get passed and some that you just get. And then chromosomal disorders, if you don't have 46, that causes problems. So you have to have 46 and the right 46. So any more or less is going to cause some disorders. Okay, so some examples of a mutation. Sickle cell anemia is going to be when your blood is not perfect. So your blood cells are not a nice disc shaped. They're going to be shaped like a sickle, which looks like a crescent moon. basically. So then, as blood is traveling through your blood vessels, every time it hits a fork in the road, it's going to start piling up. So for example, blood traveling up your chest area, and then it gets to your armpit, and it has to decide whether it's going to go to your heart or your arm. In this area, there's a big fork in the road, and because those cells are weird shaped, they start piling up. And then you get these big blood areas where it's just swelling up. It happens in all your joints, and then in the groin and armpits and things like that. So you can imagine that would be pretty painful, right? Sickle cell has, just like with thalassemia, it has a major and a minor form. So you can have the really bad and then just the minor form. And sickle cell also offers an advantage, and people that have sickle cell can't get malaria. Does anyone know what malaria is? You get it from mosquitoes. It affects your blood, then affects your liver, and you have liver damage and things like that. So if you don't have good blood, then the protist that causes malaria can't infect your blood. So can you hypothesize as to which continent has a lot of sickle cell? Africa, right? Because there, having sickle cell is actually kind of helpful because you're not getting malaria and dying from that. So here in North America, it's really not beneficial at all because you're probably not going to get malaria here. But in Africa, it definitely is a protective thing. Okay, hemophilia we've already talked about is the bleeding disorder. Most of these genetic disorders are going to be recessive, and they are carried by someone called a carrier. You know that already. But I want you to think about, why do you think genetic disorders are usually recessive? Why are they not dominant? What? Kind of goes into our next unit, which is evolution. Thoughts of why a recessive disorder might be recessive? Yeah, people die from it. Right. So the whole process of evolution is that the ones that are really fit survive and have kids, and the ones that don't die off. So if you have a recessive disease, it hides, right? It skips generations. It only pops up every once in a while. If it's dominant, it's present a lot. And when choosing a mate, most animals are going to choose a mate with really good qualities, not weird recessive or weird disorders, right? So like a bird, when they do their little mating dance, they're proving how many good traits they have. So if you have some weird disorder where you have like some white feathers that looks weird and doesn't go along with the whole thing, then the female's not going to like you and not going to mate with you. So recessive ones will hide, so then it will be like, oh yeah, he's got really good traits. Look, everything's great. And then you have kids and bam, there's your recessive trait. Pops out and you didn't know what was happening. So you still can pass those on. So recessive disorders can hide and get passed along quite easily. Okay, chromosomal issues come back to meiosis, so all the way back to there. So meiosis, the point was you're taking those 4 chromosomes that you had, you have 2, and then each one had a copy, and then you got to get them into the 4 egg and the 4 sperm. But what happens if the chromosomes don't separate into the egg and the sperm? What happens if they stay stuck together? Right. So let's say the egg had 2 of a chromosome. It was supposed to split into 2 eggs, but it only went into 1. Now this one has 2 chromosomes, and then it joins with the sperm, who also has 1. Now you have 3 of those chromosomes. Or there's this egg that never got that chromosome, and it joins with the sperm that had 1, and you only have 1 of those chromosomes. You're not having the right amount. Okay, so if meiosis didn't work right, then you get problems. Most of the time, these chromosomal disorders will result in a miscarriage from the mom because they're going to be too severe, or the infant dies really early because they're too severe. There are some chromosomal problems in which it just kind of creates some weird developmental issues. So like Down syndrome, Someone with Down syndrome is perfectly healthy, right? They grow up, they're fine. They just have some brain development problems. And that comes from having that extra 21st chromosome. There's another one called Turner syndrome, in which you only have one X chromosome. So you are anatomy-wise, you're female, but you don't have that extra X to pump on the estrogen when puberty comes around, so you don't go through puberty. So basically, you look like an 11-year-old girl for your whole life. You never really hit that stage. Okay? So anyway, those chromosomal problems can... Okay. Some ways we can diagnose this. So if you want to know if your child is going to have Down syndrome or any other issue, first of all, there are some people that are at high risk of having children with Down syndrome. Basically, once you hit 35, your risk of having a child with it goes up exponentially. So once you're 35, they pretty much start mandating blood tests and things to screen for it. And what they would do is they do something called an amniocentesis. So, anatomy lesson number 1. Okay, so there's a baby surrounded by an amniotic sac that is protecting it. So it's just kind of floating in there. And that amniotic sac is filled with fluid that has the same cells as the baby. So basically they'll go in with a giant needle into the amniotic sac, pull some fluid out, and then they're going to look at those cells during mitosis and take a picture of it and count how many chromosomes they have. And if they have 46, they're good to go. If there's an extra one, they figure out which one is extra and things like that. Can you imagine why you might want to know if your child is going to have Down syndrome? Would anyone care? Would you want to know? Yeah, be prepared. The pregnancy is actually higher risk towards the end with a Down syndrome child. The labor is going to be harder, most likely. So you got to be prepared for that. And then you're going to have to maybe make some different choices as a family, right? You might want to choose to be a stay-at-home mom because sending a kid with Down syndrome to daycare is really rough on the kid. Or like you're going to have to start putting some money aside because school is going to be extra expensive for a while. They'll have to go to a special school or something like that. Or if you know a kid's going to be handicapped and not be able to walk, well, if you have a house with a lot of stairs, you might want to move, right? Like, you're going to have to make some choices. So knowing early does not necessarily mean like you're going to get an abortion or do something crazy like that. You want to know so that you're prepared, so that you don't want to like have that delivery day and then be like, oh my gosh, okay, you gotta change everything about our life right now. So basically karyotypes allow you to just be prepared. You can get genetic screenings for lots of things. Those are just simple blood tests. Like if you were concerned that you had something recessive in your genes and you just want to know, you can just do a blood test. Genetic counseling is basically you get the genetic screening, but then you're going to have a counselor sit down with you and say, okay, you have a 50% chance of this and your spouse has this much, and so they're going to predict what's the likelihood of your kids getting a certain genetic disorder. If genetics was really fun for you, if this last unit was like, I can totally do this, I like this kind of stuff, genetic counseling is an amazing job that pays a ton of money. And basically you sit there doing Punnett squares all day and predicting and then talking to people and saying, here's what is likely to happen. And you are just advising them. Like if it's a high risk that your kid's going to get hemophilia, you might say, well, you have a 99% chance of having a kid with hemophilia, so, adoption is an option. Just to advise you, this pretty sure that that's going to happen, okay? So anyway, high-paying job you can work anywhere you would want to work in the world. So just throwing that out there. A lot. Depending on the hospital that you work for, but a lot. Okay, so then moving on to biotechnology. So what can we actually do? We know all this information. We can go into any single gene and change anything we want. We have the technology to do that. Okay, so really, just as a hypothetical, this is not legal, by the way, but a hypothetical. So let's say I really wanted a perfectly healthy kid that had no genetic problems whatsoever. Plus, I really wanted blue eyes and blonde hair and cute freckles. So I could take one of my eggs and then a sperm and then put it in, put it in a petri dish, but then go in and change that brown gene to a blue gene. I could change that brown hair to blonde hair. I could just go and fix it if I wanted to. Okay? So obviously that seems crazy. But let's say you have a gene for ALS. Anyone know what that is? You did an ice bucket challenge probably this summer, yeah? But why? What does it stand for? Okay. It's Lou Gehrig's disease, basically. And basically what that is your neurons start wearing away, which causes you to lose control of certain muscles. So you are usually paralyzed, you lose the ability to speak and things like that, and you die pretty early in life. So let's say you had an embryo and it looked like, okay, this person's going to get ALS. As a parent, if you could change it, would you? That's where the question comes in. This is why this is a debatable topic. Some people say, nope, it is what it is. It's meant to be. Just let it happen. And some people say, why wouldn't you fix it? Like, I want a kid that lives, right? So there's definitely two sides to the issue as far as biotechnology goes. Some of them that are not really debated a whole lot is GMOs. These are crops and animals that can be manipulated to be whatever we want them to be. So for example, in South Dakota, we have Roundup Ready corn everywhere. And basically what that is, it's corn with a gene inserted so that when we spray a crop with Roundup that kills the weeds, it doesn't hurt your corn. So the corn doesn't die from the herbicide. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure.
That'd be so Just make one and put it in the food.
Just for fun. Yeah. So basically, we can modify a crop to do whatever we want. We can genetically combine certain things. Pluots, which are plums and apricots. Tangels with tangerines and I think it's just an orange. Anyway, so we can combine different things to create different fun things. I'm sure you guys enjoy seedless watermelon every once in a while, right? So a seedless watermelon is basically a sterile watermelon. So it's not that hard to do, really. If you think about, okay, go back to how we make sterile things. If you combine a horse with a donkey, what happens? What do you get? A mule. And what's special about a mule? Yeah. Yeah. Mules are sterile though. Okay, so mules can't have any babies because a horse and a donkey are different species. And the definition of a species is you have to be able to mate and produce fertile offspring. So horses and donkeys are anatomically similar, so they can have babies. It's just not going to be sterile, or it's not going to be fertile, so it comes out sterile. So same thing happened with watermelons. We took two different kinds of watermelons and bred them, and then these ones that have no seeds are sterile. Seeds are what reproduce, right? So it's just basically a sterile watermelon. You just like castrated it or whatever, but whatever. So the watermelon is not really that much different. It just doesn't have seeds. If you've ever seen the watermelons that are square shaped, not genetically modified. They just grow them in a box. Okay. So there are some things that people think are genetically modified, like a grapple. Grapple is an apple that's been infused with grape juice. So it's It's not. It's just basically been soaked in grape juice. It's not genetically modified at all. Okay. Someone was telling me last period that they've had grapes that tasted like cotton candy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had them at sunshine.
So that's kind of cool. Yeah. That. I see. Well, I'm sure someone will work on it.
So it's illegal to like make up your own little like you can't like genetically do something and like make your own type of kid or
For humans, we can do that to animals. We do.
mix any animal
Yeah.
to make it look.
Yeah, I have a whole slideshow on the different things we've done to animals, if we get to it a little bit.
You know how like oranges are pre-sliced by nature? Why don't they do that with like apples?
They're already sliced. Look at that. See, you have a future as a genetic scientist. You can do these things. Yep.
How come some oranges have seeds in them and some don't?
Not, no, not legal.
But some oranges have seeds in them and some don't.
Yeah. Same idea.
That's
Uh-huh. Same idea. Okay, other things we can do. Stop. Okay. Another one is drought resistant. So basically what we can do is, it's called BT corn. You take the gene from tobacco and put it in the corn. Tobacco is drought resistant. Obviously it grows in the south really well. And it doesn't really need much. So it's not like you're taking tobacco and putting it. You're just taking the gene that allows it to be drought resistant, putting in the corn, so that corn can survive through all kinds of conditions. This is kind of the crop that we have been helping third world countries to grow. Can you imagine how drought resistant corn would be helpful in Africa? Right? That'd be good for them so they don't lose their whole crop. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Cloning is something highly debatable. Cloning is creating a genetically identical individual from the original. And it's actually a fairly simple process, and we've cloned lots of things. Okay, so let me try to explain this as simply as I possibly can. Let's say I want to clone myself. Okay? What I would do, I'd take just a normal skin cell. I would take the nucleus out of the skin cell. Okay, now I have a nucleus with some DNA in it. Then I would take one of my eggs and take the nucleus out of that egg. I would put the nucleus from the skin cell into that egg. So now it's a fertilized egg. Not by a sperm or anything, it just has a full set of chromosomes, so it's good to go. We take that egg, implant it into a uterus, and it's going to work just like any other pregnancy. It's going to grow and develop and whatever. Now, just to gross you out just a little bit, that would mean I would have to like give birth to myself. Right. Well, so basically, your clone is going to be exactly you, except 32 years younger than me. So there's movies where people like clone themselves and they're like all the same age. That's stupid. You can't do that. No. But it would be much younger than you for sure, because it still has to go through the birthing process. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same dog. Yeah.
But then don't they have like the same genes of an older dog?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't they have like the genes of an older dog though? Like if you get them from the older dog. Oh, that's disgusting. How like people remember we were saying how like if you take it from the dog and he's already like really old, like his newborn dog is like a puppy. He like has like if the older dog has arthritis, he might have arthritis.
No, Mr. Jekyll was talking about those die faster.
Oh.
Yeah. Clone animals die faster than the original. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Okay, so everything physically would be the same, right? But your brain, okay, so my brain would be the exact same structure and everything, be fine. But as I've grown up, there's been certain connections that have been made, right? So like I've learned things through my life. I've seen things. My parents have taught me things. You know, I've been through lots of different things. That child would be grown up in a different scenario. Go to a different school. They would live in the age of technology, which I did not grow up in, you know. So there's all kinds of things that would be different. So they would maybe would look the same as I did when I was that age, and probably have some of the same mannerisms, but would not be the same exact person.
Like, would they act the
Yeah.
same and everything?
Well, like mannerisms tend to be the same, they're genetically passed down, but
They wouldn't have like the same habits and stuff.
right. Yeah, and there's different habits that you develop because of the people you've been around and things like that, right? Okay. So why would we want to do this? Basically, cloned animals can be used to produce a lot of like human proteins that we can use to treat. So like we talked about hemophilia, they have to go get blood transfusions of platelets so that they can keep clotting. So we can just produce those in mass in animals and take them out and use them. We could make more animals for food. Um, I mean, you could, I suppose, if you were a pretty wealthy rancher, you could take your really awesome cow that was churning out tons of milk and clone her a couple times, and then you have a lot of cows producing a ton of milk. So you could do that. Um, you could actually manipulate these animals. So before you even implant that egg, you can manipulate it to have really lean meat, like for cattle or whatever. So we can manipulate that. That's called transgenic animals. You've manipulated them to be what you want them to be. That happens a lot, actually. We can rebuild endangered populations, although this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do. So let's say we're talking about the black rhino, which is almost extinct. I think there's 2 left in the wild. Yeah. So if we clone the black rhino, does that mean it's not endangered anymore? Because what's the problem with that?
Faster than the original.
Yeah, they die faster, but what else is the problem with that?
They're all the same.
They're all the same, so they can't really have babies, right? And if they do, if you like clone a male and clone a female, then they're gonna have the same genetically identical offspring over and over again, which is really gonna be bad for the gene pool. That's like incest over and over again. We don't want to do that. So, so it really wouldn't be that great unless it's like for a zoo breeding program or something where you're gonna send it off to a different zoo or something. And we can use it to clone just organs for a transplant. We can use like pig hearts and pig valves to repair hearts and stuff. So pigs are almost exactly the same as far as their organs go. Oh, I have to tell you a story about Dolly right there. Dolly the sheep. Okay, so just a good story just to make you laugh in the middle of this. So Dolly was the first animal ever cloned. It was a sheep. And basically what they did is they took a cell from a mammary gland. Where's the mammary gland? Thanks, Josh. Yeah, in the breast, right? So that's what produces milk for a female. So they took one of those cells and did the whole cloning process. The reason they called her Dolly is after Dolly Parton, who has, there you go. So anyway, that's how she got her name. So there you go. That was actually in my trivia crack over the weekend. Yep. And I'm really good at it. No, it was what was the first cloned animal? What?
Are we gonna see the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, when we get done with this, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay.
That still makes my whole day.
Okay. All right. All right. Next thing we talk about is stem cells, which is also a hotly debated topic. Stem cells are cells that can become anything. Okay, so they haven't yet decided if it's going to be skin or bone or muscle or whatever. Okay, so it hasn't decided yet. You have cells in your body that are stem cells, like they can become things, usually in your bone marrow. So basically, we can take those, and let's say you needed to repair some tissue in your body. We can kind of coax those stem cells to help repair some tissues in your body. It's kind of limited though because you have to use your stem cells. You can't use anybody else's and things like that. Embryonic stem cells come from an embryo, and basically, okay, so you have fertilized egg, which is a zygote, right? And then it divides over and over and over again to make a big cluster of cells. At that point, all those cells are stem cells, and they haven't decided what they're going to be yet. So you could take those cells and make them become whatever you want them to be. Which can, let's say there was a soldier that just got back from Iraq and he's paralyzed and he needs his spinal cord fixed. Well, we know that nerve cells can't reproduce, right? Done deal. Nerves are done. So if we could coax a stem cell to become a spinal cord cell and regrow, then we can actually regrow a spinal cord and fix paralyzed people. Or if you've ever known someone with Alzheimer's, anyone known someone? Yeah, it's like the most horrible thing in the world to watch. So your brain just like starts shutting down and you forget everything. And then you just kind of lose the ability to control yourself. So if we could actually repair brain tissue so that your brain doesn't degrade, how awesome would that be, right? So the big thing that is debated with embryonic stem cells is they come from embryos, right? So that would mean that that embryo is not going to be a baby and is not going to grow up. Where embryonic stem cells come from now when we do research with them, it's not like we're just taking a bunch of egg and sperm and making a bunch of babies in a test tube and then doing tests on them. So when a female does in vitro fertilization, in vitro requires, so like a woman can't get pregnant naturally on her own. The sperm is just not finding that egg. So basically they could take the dad's sperm and the egg, and then you put together in petri dishes, and they usually make like 20 of them. And then, yeah, and then they stick those in the female. And a lot of times they'll find a couple that are just like not really strong embryos, and they just like throw those in the garbage, basically. So a woman could say, I would like my extra embryos to go to scientific research, because they're going to get thrown away anyway. So, no, it's like a donation to science. But anyway, so that's where our embryos come from, is from in vitro. So, just so that. All right. So we can do a lot of things with these stem cells. We can screen drugs. Okay. So there are many drugs that we don't necessarily want to test on humans, but we could just test them on the cells, and it would tell us pretty fast if it was a good drug or not. Identify causes of birth defects, and then, like we said, this is the big one for me, healing nerve damage. Like, I think that's pretty awesome if we could do that. This picture just kind of shows all the things that we think we can fix with stem cells. So, yeah, you can regrow a tooth. Yeah, in a dish. Yep.
How can we do all this stuff, but then we can't like cure cancer?
Yeah. Cancer is a tricky thing.
If we can't just like what?
Yeah, I mean, they think that stem cells might be the way to cure cancer, but we don't know how yet. But because cancer is your own cells that have rebelled against you, not like some weird thing happened. Okay, so this is what we're going to be discussing over the next couple days, is mainly the ethics involved. So, all this genetic technology raises certain issues. So, for example, legal issues. I don't know if you've read the Constitution lately, but genetics is not in there at all, because obviously they had no idea. So, we don't really have a lot of rules associated with your genetic manipulation, because this is new territory. So, we got to figure out what's legal, what's not, what's okay, what's not. Ethical issues, that's your moral compass, what you think is wrong and right. Okay? There are two sides to every coin. So some people are like, yeah, let's genetically manipulate our children. Let's make them perfect. And some people are like, no, don't touch it. It is the way it is, right? So that's your moral compass. That's different for everybody, okay? Social issues. Can you predict what would happen to society if we could manipulate our babies? Would we all be?
We don't look perfect.
There's so many hot women to choose from. Which one?
Basically, people who, or at first, people who were genetically modified would be, like, rebelled against that rest of society, but then it would be completely normal thing, and people who didn't have genetic mutations or whatever would be.
Right. So what level of society do you think can actually make? Yeah, it's like rich people, right? So you would have rich people making perfect babies, and then everybody else just leaving it to chance. Okay, that would cause these two major classes of people: the perfect people and the slightly messed up people, which we all are, right? But you know, so yeah, so you would definitely have society problems. Okay. And then obviously your religion plays into it too, where your moral compass lies and what your religion says about it. Some other questions like who owns a genetically modified organism? Lots of people think that you could patent that. So let's say I'm the first one to clone a sheep. Anyone who wants to clone a sheep after that would have to pay me because I own that technology. Yeah, I suppose. Who controls your genetic information? Who's in charge of it? Who should know about it? How private is your genetic information? So just so you know, if you were to commit a felony, um, you it used to be you just got your fingerprints in the system. Now they actually take a swab of your cheek and your DNA is in the system. It's called CODIS. So let's say there's this person that is in and out of jail for rape or something like that, and they find hair at a crime scene or something like that. They could just take that one little hair, run it through the database, and be like, oh, matches that guy, because he's been in and out of jail or whatever, and find him really fast. So it's really good for police, obviously, to be able to find someone really fast. However, that means your DNA is in a public database, which if you're a felon, it's like, too bad. You made a bad choice, but whatever. But there's a big debate about whether every single person should have their DNA in CODIS, which would make solving crimes really, really fast, right? But at the same time, their DNA is out there. Who might want to know about your genetic information? Yeah.
Credit card hacker.
Yeah. Identity fraud things. Yeah, well.
Credit card fast.
Yep, there you go. I know. See, you guys probably don't care about this right now because you're teenagers and have better things to worry about at the time. But someone who really wants to know is your insurance company, okay? Because let's say you're going to get ALS when you're 30. Do they want to insure you? No, you're going to be really expensive. So they could just say, no, looks like you're going to have ALS, so we don't want to insure you. Yeah, right? Or you're going to get breast cancer. That's expensive. We don't want to insure you for that. Which may sound hilarious. It's not. When I first got out of college, I was a substitute teacher, which you don't get insurance if you're a substitute. And so I had to buy my own insurance, and I applied at like 3 different insurance agencies, and I was turned down in all 3 of them. because I had thalassemia. So they said I couldn't have insurance. So I went for 3 years with no insurance because no one would insure me. So, and that's because I had thalassemia minor, which we've talked about, does absolutely nothing. Like, it's not a big deal. So imagine if you had something like ALS or breast cancer or whatever, like, they would not insure you at all. So I think after the Affordable Care Act, you cannot be denied based on that anymore. So good news, I guess, on that front. Okay, we already talked about that one. There's a lot of people that don't think that GMOs are safe. That's actually quite debated still. So anyway, there you go. And some things that I want you to think about. Would you want to know if you're hiding recessive traits or not? If there's anything in there. Should your insurance company know about it? And how do you feel about genetically modified crops? We'll talk about that later. All right. All right. I will.